Today we have Nolan Stevens, Public Policy Liaison from OSHLA, Ohio Commission Hispanic Latino Affairs. Good morning and welcome to Latina Today.
Good morning, Lorena. Thanks for having me.
Could you please share with us what is the current Ohio legislation for human trafficking?
Sure. Ohio was actually the 45th state to pass a piece of legislation regarding human trafficking, and it didn't happen until December of last year, December of 2010. It was one of the last three bills that Governor Strickland signed. It was authored by Teresa Fetter and Tim Grindell, one Republican and one Democrat from the Ohio legislature. And what it does is it makes human trafficking in Ohio a standalone second-degree felony.
Nolan, but how does the Trafficking Victim Protection Act of 2000 punish the different forms of human trafficking, labor, or sex trafficking?
Well, it actually doesn't distinguish. And let me point out that the Trafficking and Trafficking Victims Protection Act is federal legislation, so it's different from the Ohio law that was passed last year.
Mm-hmm.
The federal legislation empowers victims to bring federal civil suits for actual and punitive damages, and it also includes the offenses as parts of the RICO, or Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization statute, which carries tremendous penalties, including 20 years in prison, $250,000 fine, and a forfeiture of any property that you got through trafficking. So, for example, if you're profiting from labor, trafficking labor, you would have to forfeit your profits to the United States.
How the traffic victim is protected, and what happens if the trafficked person is undocumented?
Under Ohio law, we actually have no such provision for protecting the trafficked person. They're generally called pieces of safe harbor legislation, and that's really the next step for Ohio's state enforcement. However, the TVPA, which you referenced, the federal law, actually does have some provisions that protect victims. It makes victims eligible for benefits and services for state and federal programs like housing, education, job training, healthcare, and other social programs. It also gives victims what's called a T visa, which is a temporary resident status visa. And every year, the Act authorizes 5,000 people that had T visas to become permanent residents after they've had their T visas for 3 years. Tough situation for them. But with this new legislation and the T visa, they actually get temporary resident status and access to federal and state social programs. And then after 3 years with their temporary status, they're eligible to become a permanent resident.
Nolan, are there visible indicators of sex trafficking? Are there signs that a person is being held as a slave? What do we need to know if that?
There are a few. Vulnerable populations, so maybe people that don't speak the language or people that are in poorer communities are more likely to be victims of human trafficking. If somebody's distrustful of authority or unable to leave their job or think that they must work their job, if they're afraid of revealing immigration status, or if somebody else holds their travel and or identity documents, those are all signs that somebody might be a human trafficking victim. And there's a website, it's www.acf.hhs.gov/trafficking that has a bunch more indicators for when you may be dealing with a victim of human trafficking.
Nolan, as a community, what do we need to know if we suspect that we are in the presence of a trafficking victim?
Well, you'd have to know what to do. And the thing that I would recommend, since Ohio does not yet have safe harbor legislation, is to contact the federal government. You need to be able to be aware of what the signs are, and you need to know who to contact. And that number is the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. It's 1-888-373-7888, and they can help you determine whether or not you've encountered a human trafficking victim, and they can identify local resources to help human trafficking victims in your community. In addition to the Human Trafficking Resource Center, the FBI, the Department of Labor, Department of Justice, even the State Department, and Homeland Security all have an interest in enforcing laws against human trafficking. So there are many federal places to turn.
But Nolan, what happens if the person that suspects that he or she is in the presence of a trafficking victim is undocumented?
Nothing should happen. However, given the current climate, we really can't make any guarantees. So what that person can do if they're undocumented and they're very nervous that reporting it in their community could get them in trouble, they're welcome to call OSHLA. And on a case-by-case basis, we can review it and decide whether to report it.
Do you have a phone number that they can contact just in case, and I can just put it in my interview?
Sure. The best one really is the National Human Trafficking Resource Center that I gave you, the 888-373-7888. If they're worried because of their immigration status and they have nobody that they can turn to in their community, you can call OCHLA at 614-466-8333.
Nolan, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to interview you and to learn more about human trafficking in Ohio. Do you have a message for the Hispanic Latino community that's listening to this interview?
We really want to encourage people to report this. I mean, if you call the national number that I gave you, or if you visit that website, or if you're worried because of your own immigration status, if you just contact somebody in the community or contact our office. Part of the problem with human trafficking is people don't report it because, they live in fear of their own immigration status or something like that being revealed, and we've really got to get past that barrier.
Well, thank you so much, Nolan. I appreciate it so much, and have a wonderful day.
I'm honored you would ask. You too.